Good morning. I've been reading through the Old Testament again and looking at Israel coming into the promised land and how they had to fight the nations that were there in order to be able to receive what God had promised. And how the scripture indicates that it was very important to God for his people to learn to fight. He even preserved opportunities for those who had not, who were maybe too young and had, they're in the process of growing up. He preserved opportunities for them to be able to learn warfare. And there are a couple of things that stick out to me about that whole scenario. And the first is that even though God had promised the Israelites that the land would be theirs, and he promised them that he would give them victory over the nations that were already there, um, God's enemies, very wicked people. He told the Israelites, you go in there and you fight against them, and I'll give you victory. Even though, God could have snapped his fingers and eliminated all those people in one moment. But instead, he gave Israel the opportunity to learn to do battle, which seems like an odd thing. But then when you think about the benefits of having experienced warfare, um, there really are some. And he wanted those benefits for his people. Um, and then he did give them victory, after they had fought the way that he wanted them to fight, and they had wanted them to fight, excuse me. They had the experience, they got the experience that he wanted them to have, and then he gave them victory. And I think sometimes that a life in our life with Christ, we expect maybe for God to snap his magic fingers and fix our problems, when sometimes we have a responsibility to do something as part of the process. There's some obedience that's required on our part in order for God to bless us. So that's a thing that I've been thinking about. If you're in a situation right now where you really have a tremendous need from God, I would encourage you to look at, are you fulfilling the responsibilities that he would have you fulfill, so that then you can ask him for the victory or the blessing or the provision or whatever it is that um, that you need him to provide. Are you doing your part so that you're free and clear to ask him to do his part? Because it's very common that he requires that. The because and the reason really is not because he can't do it by himself, but because we benefit from the experience. There's some experience there that he wants us to have that is going to be beneficial to grow our character, to help us to change and mature, and he wants us to have that experience. um, and so he requires something from us, and he also just requires obedience, and it's good for us to have the experience of obeying him, and then we see that the blessing comes when we obey. So there's that. And the second thing that I've been thinking about is that the whole of the Christian life is warfare. Anybody who tells you otherwise is selling something, right? um, there's so many places in scripture where God talks about us being soldiers, or taking up the battle, different things um, along those lines. And obviously it's not with the physical sword and shield at this point. But just as the Israelites fought against God's enemies, and those enemies became the Israelites' enemies because they were God's people, it's the same for us. God has enemies still. And when we join with him, his enemies become our enemies. And then we are warring a warfare. There is a fight against the enemies of God that have become our enemies. And the scripture is clear. about what those enemies are. They are the world, the flesh, and the devil. We're not going to talk about that right now. But the point is that I think, unfortunately, that in the modern era, Christianity is sold to people, if you will, as something that is going to make your life easier. It's going to make it more, rainbows and lollipops and fluffy puppies and stuff like that. And that's garbage. That's absolute garbage. There are some tremendous benefits to being joined with the Lord. I wouldn't have it any other way. My life has changed completely and for the better since I, you know, since I became connected with Him. But this life is a fight, and there isn't. It's disingenuous to not be honest about that. So I can say categorically that there is not anything that you can choose to do with your life that is more difficult than following Christ. There's nothing. There's nothing as difficult as following Jesus. There's also nothing as rewarding, but um, it doesn't take away the fact that God expects us to fight, that if we are allied with Him, we will fight His enemies. That's the way it is. So, and then the victory comes. The victory is His if we're fighting according to His purposes. So, I don't know. Just things that I'm thinking about this morning. Leave me some comments. Tell me what you think. Okay. Have a good day. Be blessed. Bye.